So this is my little brother Mark. I say little. He's not that little, and he's not. He's only a couple years younger than me. But he just started riding again after 30 years not being on a bike. Um, and I'm pretty excited to be riding with him again. But I'm also a little bit concerned. He bought a bike a few weeks ago, and now he's gone and bought another one. He bought this Tiger the week before we did this ride on Sunday, and I convinced him to go riding with me once again because I want to make sure that he is progressing properly and doesn't get himself into trouble, as I have seen quite a few riders his age get back into riding and not really develop those skill sets that they need. You may remember Mark from a previous video that we did together. We went on a short ride, but before we went on the ride, we got out in the parking lot and brushed up on some skills, some turning, braking, handling type skills that we call motorcycle gymkhana. And there's the link up here. But anyway, it was a great day of riding, but I was still concerned, and I kind of planned it appropriately to take him down some interesting roads at a moderate pace and kind of show him the roads, and then follow him out the very same roads and make sure he wasn't doing anything that was going to get him in trouble or get him hurt. And it just following him around made me a bit uncomfortable. I think in the beginning he did quite a few things that make me uncomfortable. Cutting corners, riding across the paint, riding in the opposite oncoming lane like he's doing now, makes me real uncomfortable. And I discussed that with him on one of our, a couple of our stops. Stop riding in the paint. If you can't ride in your lane, you're riding beyond your skill level, and I didn't want to see him ride off the road if he couldn't keep it in his lane. I didn't want him wind up in the woods and have an ambulance ride out. And just the more we rode that day, the more I thought it was appropriate to talk about some of the things that will get you in trouble as a new rider or a returning rider. And I have both of those in my family. Mark rode motorcycles up into his early 20s, and then he got married and settled down and had kids and was responsible and gave up that life of motorcycling that I've been enjoying ever since Mark and I were teenagers. But he is a returning rider, and in my opinion they are much more dangerous than new riders many times, because they are overconfident and they have the bravado that they had when they were teenagers or young men, and rode really fast because they had those skills that allowed them to push the limits. And as we get older, our reflexes shorten, as mine have shortened dramatically, and I've actually slowed down on four wheels and two wheels. I don't skateboard anymore. There's all kinds of things that I've given up or at least slowed down. But following him this day made me realize I needed to go a bit further than just riding around and doing some intermittent coaching, and bringing up some points that maybe he needed to investigate. I decided that I wanted to talk more about the things that can get you in trouble, and maybe work on some more skill building exercises. And not just riding, because this road was pretty tame compared to a couple that we're going to ride later on in the video. But it did make me gasp a couple of times, thinking, man, he's going into this corner way too fast. He's going to swing wide. He's he's going to run off the road. He's going to go into oncoming traffic. And he handled it mostly pretty well for basically his first time being back. He's ridden the other bike, I think a couple of times, but just mainly the one day that we rode. I think we maybe put 150 miles on his other bike, and he bought this one and just started putting the hammer down. we had a blast riding, but it did make me think of an incident that I actually got footage of a few years back. A returning rider, obviously returning rider, the guy talked about the experience he had. He joined us. Nobody really knew him. He was outside of our group, but we invited him in, given the experience that he expressed. Seemed like he was a decent rider. So we allowed this guy to join us on what turned out to be an extremely moderate ride. We weren't going fast at all, but the guy wound up running off the road as he was trying to catch up with us, obviously. And this is some of the footage from the corkscrew where the accident happened. The accident happened directly behind us. And as you can see, this is a fairly moderate pace. The fastest bikes were in the rear, and I'm actually looking back where the crash happened, and if you look closely, you can see a puff of dust being kicked up by the bike leaving the road over here. I did not realize it at the time, as I was just filming the guys that were in our little group here, but we went back and found this gentleman basically took this corkscrew turn by surprise. He came around the corner and misjudged the turn and wound up sliding off the road and broke his collarbone and took a trip to the hospital in an ambulance, and it was just an ugly scene, and I don't want to have to repeat that scene. I don't want to see this anymore. So one of the things I'm trying to do today is prevent this from happening, at least to my brothers and anybody else that ever rides with me again. I can point them to some resources. So perhaps now you will understand my concern and my motivation for making a video like this, where I'm expressing my concern over seeing the things that I've seen. This is just one of many crashes that I've been on a ride. Somebody, a new guy shows up, or somebody that's been riding for years that just maybe hasn't ridden in 2 or 3, or in my little brother's case, 30 years, or in my older brother's case, never really at all on the pavement. They're both progressing greatly, but I do have the concern, and I don't want to see this again. If I can help it, if I can change, and that's kind of what I'm doing with this video, and hopefully some future videos is maybe help some other people realize the things that are going to get you hurt on a bike and maybe even get you killed. And right now we're going down a very interesting road close to the river. This is Smith Camp Road, and there are quite a few surprises, and we're going over a couple right now. These little roller coasters. It's got a couple of turns on the other side, blind downhill turns right after a rise like this. It's really tricky, and you throw into the mix the fact that your suspension is being unloaded. If you're going really quickly, hell, you don't have to go fast on this road to get in trouble. There's a lot of surprises on this road, and the video really doesn't do these roads justice. And we're going at a pretty good clip here. I was pretty uncomfortable watching the little brother stretch it out here. We came in a good bit more conservative than this, but I did want him to. That's what I instructed him. Try your best to stay within sight of me, so you can see where my lines are, and hopefully, not put it in the ditch or into the tree line. And I consider, I think he touched the paint a couple of times on the way out, but I consider his riding greatly improving, and I'm just glad that I could not only spend the time with him riding, but get a little bit of friendly brotherly advice. My brothers seem to take my advice well, and I think that a lot of riders have the ego where it might not allow them to take advice from other riders, and especially folks that they see as their peers. It's a bit intimidating, I've probably had been in the same place myself a few times, but somebody that's a better rider than me, I'm always open to tips, something that I can improve my riding abilities or my skill level, anything like that. How I can improve cornering, braking, anything like that. And I wished everybody was that open to riding better. I think that's the problem that gets most people in trouble. Most riders get in trouble because they think that they're good already, and they're not. They're just simply not. The evidence reflects that, especially if you only ride a few times a year, 10, 15 times a year. That's all you ride. You're going to forget all that stuff, most of it every year. And it's probably that first time back or the second time back every year when you start riding. Pulling into a little place called River Cafe here. It's pretty amusing. People ride their motorcycles out to this place to get drunk and then ride their motorcycles back. Anyways, just River Rat Cafe is that's probably more appropriate. But anyway, pretty interesting place. They've got great food and beer and popcorn, and we stopped in to get a beer and some popcorn before we finished up the ride, and maybe talk about a little bit about some of the things that I saw, and get him moving forward. And about an hour and 50 miles later, we wound up dual sporting. He's actually riding a more adventure type motorcycle with much better tires than I've got for riding in dirt. But I thought I could make a quick trip to an old boat landing at this park. This is we're out at a fantastic road known as Goodwater. It's Goodwater Road is out in the middle of nowhere. There's not a lot of traffic. The only people that come out here are people that are going fishing, and that's it. There's only a few people that live out here, and most of them live at the top of the road. But after we get off of this dirt road, we're going to hit the pavement again. These are some really long, fast sweepers, and I think it gives us a little bit more opportunity to learn about throttle position and braking and cornering and things like that, where the lines are a lot more obvious, and it gives you more time to adjust to the lines. So we made a quick pass here. We'd already come out this far with me in front, and I wanted Mark to lead back, so maybe take a little bit more time to see exactly where his bike position was in the lane. He did get into some more paint, which is a big no-no to me. As I said before, I think it's if you're riding on paint, you're riding too fast, or you're riding beyond your skill level, and I think it's a pretty big indication that if you can't keep it in your lane, you're going to hit a car eventually, an oncoming vehicle, or you're going to run off the road. And that was my preaching for today was, don't go too fast that you're in the paint. You take it for granted when you're in a car, but this motorcycle, you could put 3 motorcycles side by side and ride this road. Maybe not at these speeds, but you could certainly do it at lower speeds. So if you've got that much lane, there's really no reason for you to be crossing into the oncoming traffic ever, in my opinion. And that's also one of my pet peeves with other vehicles. If you're in my lane coming towards me, you're going to get the horn, you're going to get the finger. Keep it in your lane. How hard is it? Most of the people that I see doing that are, 20, 30, 40 plus over the speed limit, and they may know these roads pretty well. But if you're in my lane, when I come around a corner, it makes me very angry, and you can see he hit the paint there. But he got my reprimand, and it's just it's a lot of things to think about, and some of these things people have never thought about before. They've never heard anybody say, "Hey, why are you in the paint? What did you do back there? You went wide. You blew the turn. You got to concentrate more. You're going to get yourself into trouble. Things like that. You're not going to hear that from anybody else, typically, unless you're taking a track day course. Unless you've got a instructor that you're paying, most people are not going to give you the insight and help you work on skills. And that's all a lot of what we did today. We had a blast riding, but also felt a lot better given some tips that this returning rider had desperate need of. I mean, he's a pretty good rider. I gotta give that to him. He's a decent rider, and every time I asked him about his confidence, he's like, "Man, I'm uncomfortable," and I think that's a good thing, especially with the speeds that we were hitting today. He should have been uncomfortable, but other than hitting the paint a few times and working on his lines, entering the corner and exiting the corner. Other than that, I think he did great. And hopefully from now on, if he's not trying to impress me with his riding skills, maybe he'll ride at a more comfortable pace for him and enjoy the ride. Hopefully he'll be able to get out on his own and ride and have a comfortable riding day on these wonderful roads that I've introduced him to. Still haven't taken the older brother out to this road, but I did take him down Smith Camp, and he did pretty well there too. Got to keep them both off the paint and keep them from blowing the corners and going wide. But another great day of riding with one of my brothers. Can't wait to the day that we all three get out together. Hopefully that'll be one day soon.